Hey everyone, welcome to this live stream. My name is Grant Kamina. I do product here at Upbound, and joining me is Daniel Mangum. He is an Upbound engineer leading efforts around Upbound Universal Crossplane. He has a big passion for developer experience, and he's also a Crossplane maintainer. And today we're going to talk a little bit more about Upbound Universal Crossplane, which is a downstream distribution of Crossplane that Upbound released very recently. And we're also going to talk a lot more about the Upbound CLI. Last time Dan and I did a live stream, we focused mostly on UXP and some of the product announcements we had made that week. And we got a lot of feedback from the audience and the community to talk a little bit more about the Upbound command line and some of the innovations and developer experience enhancements we're adding there. So today we're going to go over both the Upbound command line, some new commands that Dan and team have actually added to it that make it a lot easier to package up your providers and configurations, and then also some commands that help you take those providers and configurations and move them into Upbound registry. So it's easy to collaborate and share those creations with your team. That's a quick little preview and everything. I'm going to give it over to Dan real quick just to do a more detailed introduction on himself, and then we'll get right into it.
Awesome. Thanks, Grant. Yeah, so as Grant said, I am a Crossplane maintainer and then work on some of the UXP or Universal Crossplane and developer tooling at Upbound. I've recently, leading up to our launch, which we did a live stream on a few weeks ago, I was working a lot on the Upbound CLI. So I've definitely been happy to get that out there and have folks give a little bit of feedback. One of the really important parts of Crossplane and subsequently Universal Crossplane is the ability to create packages and push those to OCI distribution compliant registries. And we specifically here on our Upbound live stream are big fans of the Upbound registry, which provides some extra metadata and indexing on top of your packages. So folks for a while could use tools like Docker or Podman or any of those sorts of things to construct OCI images. But the Crossplane ones are kind of specific in that they have a single file and a single layer. There's just a YAML stream of manifests, essentially. So we also have some tooling in upstream Crossplane that allows you to construct these packages. And I believe that's what most folks are using. With the Upbound CLI, we can integrate that similar functionality a little bit better with Upbound's product offerings. And it's really nice because with both these projects being open source, we can consume actually the same parser and the same parser backend, we call it, to be able to perform some of that package building. And it's actually the same one that Crossplane consumes, so you can ensure compatibility there. So anyway, as Grant mentioned, we had the 0.3.0 release. So we are pre 1.0 with the Upbound CLI. So definitely give us the harsh feedback and we'll make the changes to get this right for users. But we do have some new functionality. So I think we're going to dive into that. Does that sound good, Grant?
Yeah, that sounds great. And before we begin too, just to piggyback off of some of what you were saying, it's super important to keep in mind that Upbound Universal Crossplane and the Upbound CLI are open source, and we'll add some links to both of those repositories in the notes for this recording when it's released. They're open source, and everything you see for the most part in this video is going to be free or free to start using, including a lot of the Outbound Cloud functionality and Upbound registry functionality. So we're excited about that, and would love to get the harsh feedback we need here with some of the early progress we're making. With that, Dan, do you want to share your screen?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing I'm going to show here is just we'll take a look at the release notes for 0.3 for the Up CLI. And so you'll see here that there isn't too much here, but there are some key features that were introduced since the 0.2 release. Namely, what we're concerned about today is building and pushing packages. And the other kind of major feature is around being able to manage control plane tokens. And that's specifically around when you are creating control planes. with a self-hosted UXP install. And we're going to walk through that full process today. But the first thing we want to do is, for folks who aren't familiar with cross-plane packages, we want to show you, kind of how those get built, as well as how you can do that with Upbound CLI and how that facilitates interacting with the registry. First thing you need to do to get started is install the Upbound CLI. As you can imagine, I do have it locally, but we'll go ahead and go through it here. We have a nice vanity URL here to be able to install the Up CLI, and I'll go ahead and run through it again just for fun. And we'll move that into my path. And let's check the version and make sure we have the latest. Looks good. And so from now, we can take a look at kind of the commands that have been supported for a while. And I'll bump up the size here a little bit. And we break these down into categories to make them a little bit easier to get in the right mindset when you're using different functionality of Upbound Cloud. And so the first category here would be cloud. And that's when you're interacting with actual components that you'd see in the Upbound UI, which we'll jump in a moment. Second, we have UXP commands. So this is involved in installing UXP into a cluster. We have a pluggable installer structure, but we by default will use Helm to install UXP, and we'll show what that looks like in a moment. And then the last thing, which these are the newest commands here, are X-package commands. X-package is the extension we put on cross-plane OCI images. Essentially, for those who aren't familiar, an OCI image is essentially a fancy tarball. And so we use a distinct package extension. It also allows us to distinguish between our concept of an on-disk package or that OCI image versus a package installation, which is an object that gets created in the cluster and instructs crossplane to make that package present there. Importantly, something I want to point out is folks who have used a crossplane CLI before, which we can pull that up here. I have it aliased to KXP. You're not going to see commands like install configuration or install provider right now. These are useful to some folks and they're nice shorthand. Essentially what that's doing is just constructing that provider configuration manifest for you and then applying it to your cluster. The reason why we've decided not to go down that route right now with Upbound CLI is that is a pretty imperative command. So we'd actually encourage folks to version control their provider and configuration installs and use best practices like GitOps to be able to do that. That being said, once again, it is a convenience. So if we get some good user feedback around that being helpful, I'm sure we'd look to address it as well.
Also going forward too, along that lines for the audience, going forward as well, GitOps and CI/CD integrations are a big focus area of ours. We see and we work with a lot of customers, pretty much every day, helping them integrate UXP and Upbound Cloud into their pre-existing pipelines. So the more folks that have feedback or ideas about best practices there and are want to share what they're doing, kind of in the field or in their production environments, we would love to get that feedback from them.
Absolutely. And there's a number of different ways to provide that feedback, by the way. Obviously, we are present in Crossplane Slack, but also all of these repos are open source. So you're welcome to open issues for specific features you'd like to see, for instance, in the Up CLI. We also have various contact information on the website. So feel free to go through those means as well. Since we're interested in actually building a package and pushing it to the Upbound registry, I thought it might be a good idea to get started with actually creating a repository on Upbound Cloud and maybe taking a look at what the registry looks like there. So I am going to hop over. I've already logged in to my Upbound Cloud account here, and I'm in the Dan org. So every user has their personal account, and then they can be added to any number of organizations. You can also add other team members to that. I have added Grant to my org here. He is one of the elite few that gets to be in the Dan org.
I think I'm also part of a team in there as well.
You may be. It looks like you are.
Yeah,
Wow.
very cool.
You are very special. But we're going to show, I think in some past live streams, we've shown how adding folks to a team and applying that to a control plane allows them to, create resources in the Kubernetes cluster where UXP is running. We also want to show today the ability to view repositories. So you can create permissions for folks to be able to see that. And so to be able to push to the Upbound registry, you need to go in and create a new repository. And the reason for this is we have a number of different ways for how this can be exposed. And we also have a number of different types of images that can be pushed. So you'll see we have a description here that specifies type of package or container. So a container is just any arbitrary OCI image. If you're pushing a provider, for instance, you'll need to push a controller image as well as a package image that references that controller image. If you're pushing a configuration, you just need to push that package. The advantage of specifying this at the repository level here is that we get some additional parsing. So your package gets verified. So you're not going to publish something to the registry that folks aren't allowed to use or doesn't work properly. And also it allows you to make packages present. The package image is what contains all the metadata. So that's what actually shows up in the registry. So I'm going to create a package today, and we'll call this Adventures, if I can spell correctly, Adventures with Grant and Dan.
I was thinking it could have been like Dan and Grant's Excellent Adventure, but
yeah.
we can.
That would have been better, but I've already typed it all out, so we're gonna stick with this one. And I'm gonna make this one public. It's gonna so we won't mess with secrets for installing this into our cluster today, but maybe we'll show a couple of those in a future live stream.
And then one thing real quick too, and we're gonna actually change this a little bit in the product fairly soon. But right now, what's live in prod is that the visibility doesn't necessarily mean indexed and viewable by anyone in the public from Upbound registry, but it will generate a link to the repository listings that you might have. And then that link is going to be viewable or accessible by everybody. But you won't be able to necessarily go to Upbound registry, like the actual website, and see it live. Right now, that if you wanted to have your provider or configuration listed there live, it's all you have to do is reach out to the team, and there's some instructions on how to do that. And we'll go through a process to actually validate and verify that your provider or configuration is conformant and meets all of our best practices and things like that. We are going to have in the future automated publishing to Upbound, adding that to Upbound registry sometime in the future.
Absolutely. So folks are getting a product preview here. That's what you get for showing up to a live stream. So tell your friends. All right. So we're going to create this repository, and you'll see here it's specified with that URL only access. And we can look at our settings and see that it's exactly what we did before. And so now what we want to do is show actually building a package and pushing it here, and then making sure it's parsed correctly. And so I am going to do that with the platform ref AWS. So folks might be familiar with this from seeing it in the Upbound registry already. It's something that Upbound pushes, but this is a good example because Jared and some other folks have gone through and added some good metadata that allows us to have these nice annotations and images and that sort of thing. So we're going to use that here.
And this is also too, like, just to be clear, this is actually, it says it in the description, this is a cross-plane configuration. So this is a bunch of composition that has been packaged up and can be installed into any one of your control planes managed by Upbound Cloud.
Absolutely. That's a great distinction, as opposed to something like a provider, which is going to extend the control plane to different external APIs. And once again, this is open source, so you can go in here, see how these different types are defined, take a look at them, modify them. You can also see how to put validation that is going to show up in the Upbound UI if you want. And this is a pretty complete example here, so I definitely recommend taking a look. So I'm going to go ahead and get this down into my local. And we'll go in there. And like I said, I have up installed here. I believe in the documentation here, which we'll be updating soon, it has you download the Crossplane CLI and use that to build the package. We're going to show similar functionality now with the Upbound CLI, which operates pretty similar, but the commands are a little bit different. We do a little extra inference and that sort of thing with the Upbound package commands. Another thing I'll note is we're working on building additional things into packages. So Crossplane packages, as I mentioned before, are super minimal. But besides that single YAML file, which is a stream of all the manifests, it's actually very flexible in how it allows you to put other things on images. So you could actually, for instance, do something like create a provider package image that also has the provider binary in it and have it reference itself. There's all types of interesting stuff you could do with that. And so, as you can imagine, we could put some other stuff in there that makes packages have even additional functionality. So I will go ahead and see where it has our package build command, and we'll just search for it here. Yeah, so with the Crossplane CLI, which is a kube control plugin, you do something like kube control crossplane build configuration. I'm going to go ahead and take this ignore stanza here because we're going to use that as well because we don't want to bundle in the examples and the hack directory, for instance. But, actually, while we're here, I'll go ahead and show what will happen if you don't specify the ignore. You'll see that we have a failure to build the package because we're trying to put, for instance, the provider config in there, which is not valid for a configuration. And it also does a nice thing of, pointing out what file it's in and that sort of thing, which can be useful. But we are going to go ahead and actually build it, and I'll provide that ignore flag here. You'll notice that we're not specifying configuration or provider because that can be inferred from our crossplane.yaml file here. And you also notice we're not specifying a name. You can specify a name, but if you don't, it's just going to use the name in the crossplane.yaml. So if we look at the crossplane.yaml, you can see above the images and such, let's see here, that our name is platform ref AWS. So it's going to use that, and it is going to append the digest of this specific package onto the end. So that's really nice. If you've ever used Docker or something like that, you're actually not creating reproducible builds, right? Because it puts things like timestamps in there and that sort of thing. We strip all of that out. And so if you use this same source and build again, you're going to get this exact same package, which is nice because if you modify it, you want to know.
And real quick too, when you are cloning the configuration, like Dan said, there are images inside of that manifest. They're just base64 encoded, and then Upbound Cloud and the registry uses that to render icons and things like that. So when you do clone it and you go through these steps yourselves, those icons will also show up. But you're more than welcome to swap them out with other images. I think there's in our documentation, I forget the exact specification. I want to say it's like 150 pixels by 150 pixels, but I'm not 100% sure on that. But there's like a recommended image size as well. You can encode that and then swap out the encoding there in the manifest and use your own image to be rendered in the registry.
Yeah, that's a great point. And there's a lot of stuff you can customize there. And like Grant said, in our documentation, we have some more information on that. Of course, as we've encouraged throughout this stream, do reach out if there are other components that you think would be useful within your organization or for your personal use case. And we'd be happy to look into adding those as well. And so now that we've built this X package, we can go ahead and push it. Importantly for the push command, you once again do not have to specify the type of package, but you can, if you have multiple of them built in the same directory, you can specify the one you want to push. If there's only one X package file in your directory, it's going to select that one and push that for you. So since we've only built once, we can just go ahead and do up X package push without any other information. And this is going to be in the Dan account in the Adventures with Grant and Dan repo. And we'll say this is v0.1.0. And importantly, a part of the Upbound CLI that differs is we are going to default to the Upbound registry by default. And so, typically with other image pushing tools, I'll say, you're going to go to Docker Hub is the canonical one, or maybe if it's a particular vendor's product, it's going to use that. With the Up CLI, we will push to the Upbound registry by default. So that should be successful here. And that's actually using the same credentials that are in your Docker config. So if you log into the Upbound registry using Docker or just add it to your Docker config, this command will work out of the box for you. And you'll see here that it has been pushed and it was accepted, which means since this is a package, it actually parsed the contents and said, okay, this is a valid configuration package. And you can go ahead and view that in the registry as well. And you'll see that we're actually going to have the exact same metadata, right? Because we pushed the platform ref AWS package. But this is our Adventures with Grant and Dan package. And if you at home want to use this, I'll drop it in the chat here. And you can go ahead and use your own Adventures with Dan and Grant and Dan, I think, package. All right. So there is a number of different ways we could install this. But first we need to set up a control plane, right, for this to be able to run in. I was thinking I'd do a self-hosted control plane. Does that sound good to you, Grant?
That sounds great. As long as you have a Kubernetes cluster running locally, which I imagine you do.
Well, I typically do, but I don't know if well, now I do. So there we go. I'll get one spun up here real quickly.
And while you're doing that too, the way to think about Upbound Cloud is it is as a management console for all of your UXP control planes. And what's really cool about Upbound Cloud is that if you don't have a kind cluster or don't have a control plane already, with UXP already running somewhere locally, you can actually create a hosted UXP deployment. And that is something that runs in Upbound's environments and is managed by us. We handle HA, DR, and all of that good stuff. And you can do pretty much everything you could do normally with a self-hosted cluster. Or what Dan's showing you right now is if you do already have an existing Kubernetes cluster, all you're going to have to do is install UXP into that cluster. It runs as an add-on. And then using the Upbound command line, actually connect it into Upbound Cloud. And what happens is that will show up and appear like a control plane, just like a hosted control plane available in Upbound Cloud. And you're able to take advantages of all the great collaboration features and integrations with the registry there. And you also get the same great, real-time management interface that shows you all the different compositions you have installed, the types, and the status of the resources and who's using them inside of Upbound Cloud as well. So I'll let Dan go ahead and demonstrate that functionality here.
Absolutely. And so now that we have the Kubernetes cluster here, we can go ahead and install UXP. Just to add on to what Grant was saying, if you're currently running Crossplane today, you can actually upgrade to UXP from your Crossplane version, which is definitely a really nice feature to have. You should see, besides the pods getting switched out momentarily, you should see no interruption in anything you're doing. So that is a nice feature offered here. But since we don't have Crossplane installed, I'm going to go ahead and install the latest UXP version. If you omit the version, it's going to use the latest. And we should be able to now
look. Real quick, too, just for the audience, the up command there knows which, I believe you set the context in your kube config to be the cluster you just created. And when you run up UXP install, it uses that context as default, and that's the cluster that it's going to install UXP into.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want to override that, we support the same flags that kubectl does. So you can, if you add a .kubeconfig file or something in your local directory, you could just pass that in and that would be used instead. So it looks like everything is healthy and running here. So if you've seen some of our streams before, you know the next thing we have to do is attach this to Upbound Cloud. So I am going to do a help here to help me remember what commands we can run. So we can run our control plane attach, which is for self-hosted. That's the case we're going to be doing here. You can also create a hosted control plane, or you can delete any control plane or list them in your account. Importantly, you can override account in any of these commands, override your default one. For instance, my default one in my config is my personal account. We want to create this in the Dan account. So I'm going to go ahead and override that with my command. And then our new commands here are cloud control plane token commands. And we'll talk about what those do here in just a moment. But the first thing I'm going to do is up cloud attach, and I'll call this, what should we call this one? Dan, we'll just call this one Dan Grant.
Keep it simple.
And I want to do that in the Dan org. So importantly, what's actually happening behind the scenes, and you shouldn't really ever need to know this, but I think it is helpful to understand. What's happening is we're telling Upbound Cloud, hey, I have a Kubernetes cluster where I already have my control plane running. I just want to connect this up to the UI, and it's going to say, great, we will basically make an entry for you, and we're going to give you a token to be able to pass to your agent in your cluster, which is going to allow it to authenticate to Upbound Cloud. So this attach command is just doing that notification to Upbound Cloud, giving back that token. And since it gives it right back, we're going to pipe it into our up UXP connect command, which is how the agent is able to get it. Behind the scenes, once again, that token is just passed via Kubernetes secret. So you could also create that directly if you wanted. These are all kind of convenience commands here. So once again, that's emitted from our first command, and then I can just pipe it into up UXP connect. Let's see, I forgot CTP here. So control plane attach is what we want. And if we actually looked at the secrets in the Upbound system namespace, you can see that we have our Upbound control plane token, and it is brand new here. So our agent is going to pick that up momentarily, and we'll see also in our, let me hop back over to my console. We'll see that our control plane is coming up, and while that agent establishes connection, it's going to tell us it's creating this self-hosted control plane. And then once it's ready, we'll be able to click through and look at that. So we can take a look at our pods, make sure everything looks good. If you need a little more information about what's going on, I always recommend that folks take a look at our logs in the Upbound system namespace. So we'll take a look at the Upbound agent here. And it looks like it's still waiting for that control plane token to be available. I will mention in a release of UXP, which will likely be today or tomorrow, we actually restructured this a little bit. So the agent actually gets created in the cluster in response to the secret existing. So it speeds this up a little bit, which is just, same functionality, but it's a little bit nicer of an experience.
Something that's also like might be worth showing while we're waiting. Well, I was going to say, if we were still waiting and maybe later on in the demo, we should actually show how to grant permissions to team members to that repository that we uploaded as well. Might be something useful to show later on.
Yeah, no, let's go ahead and jump in here. And maybe I'll pass it off to you in a minute to show that you can see it. But I already have this team left over that I know you're a part of. If we go over to permissions, we don't have any permissions because prior to today, we didn't have any control planes or repositories existing. So what I want to do for you is add access to this control plane. And I also want to add access to our repository. So anyone could actually pull from this repository, right, if you have the URL because it's public. But this is actually going to allow Grant to do things like push to the repository. And that sort of thing. So we'll go ahead and create that permission as well, and we'll see it show up there. And if Grant logged in, he'd be able to.
I see it. I see it now, actually. So
you want to show us?
Yeah, for sure. If there we go. We'll prove to the audience. So, yep, you can see I have the Dan Grant control plane. I can click into it, and nothing's installed, so it's not super interesting right now. But if I went to the registry, I could go ahead and do that. And what's also really cool is if I go to the repositories, I can also see the Adventures with Dan Grant repository. So that's pretty neat. Dan, since you gave me permission, though, why don't I just go ahead and install the configuration?
I was just about to suggest that. That sounds
awesome.
great.
Cool. So I'm going to go, I clicked on the public link. And if I click on Run in Upbound Cloud, I can actually go ahead and, let's see, go through this wizard, which helps me install it. I'll select the control plane that I want, or I can create a new one if I didn't have one already installed. And the installation is basically instantaneous. It installs the package, and then Crossplane is going to go ahead and like reconcile all the dependencies. And so it's going to install the following providers. This gives you a nice little summary and everything there. And as it's installing, you will see what we call the Xrm Explorer. That's our main view. It's going to just show a loading dialog right now because we're still working on reconciling all these resources and types. But you'll actually, this will actually show you all the different custom types that have been installed in the cluster. And as those get reconciled, the UI updates in real time, and we can see all the different resources that we have available here. So I can see the composite cluster actually that Dan had mentioned before. As well as a composite network and Postgres instance. So if I go ahead and click on the cluster type, and keep in mind, this is actually pretty cool. I'm in Seattle, Washington, as you can see kind of here, I live in Washington. I'm going into Upbound Cloud, which is running in Upbound's GCP, whatever environment. And everything I'm seeing in this cluster is actually running. Dan, where are you now? You're in Tennessee, right?
No, I'm in North Carolina now.
North Carolina. So I'm sorry, North Carolina.
Side of the country.
Totally opposite side of the country. And he and I are, on this live stream, actually working together using the Upbound Cloud product and interface. So it's pretty cool. I'm very impressed with this kind of the product and the performance we've been able to achieve here. If I wanted to, again, we recommend for all of our customers and everything, everyone who uses Upbound in production is using GitOps approaches. But if you wanted to see some of the power of what you can actually do with the product, if I wanted to go ahead and just manually create a new instance, say I'm testing something out or in a dev environment of sorts, I can actually click on this, and that UI schema Dan showed earlier gets rendered as a dynamic, beautiful user interface. None of this is really custom. It's using the schema that has been defined in YAML. As an operations team, you don't have to write or code any like TypeScript or React apps or HTML and CSS or anything like that. The form automatically gets filled out, and you can see that validation is applied automatically as well. So I have to name this according to a certain schema, and I have to, I get options for, node size, as well as what network object, what network reference I want to use. If I had a network object, whatever that name of the object is, I could actually tell this cluster to use that and consume that as the networking component here. And you can also specify different versions of the services that can get installed into the cluster thanks to our Helm provider. But anyways, that's a short little preview of this. I can also add the cluster to favorites. So when I go over here and expand the package, the configuration package, you can see that composite cluster has been favorited, and I can access that really quickly and everything like that. But yeah, that's a quick overview of everything that we have here in the product. As if you were to connect this up to a pipeline, and as composite clusters get added, you would actually see instances of that cluster here in the UI. You'd get a chance to click on it and see all the the dependencies and their status as well, which I think we demoed in the last video also. So definitely check that out if you haven't seen it already.
Yeah, that was a great overview, Grant, and I do think it is cool that I'm running this cluster on my local machine, right, and you're installing packages into it. So I guess word to the wise, don't give Grant access to your cluster. But just to make that a little more concrete, right, I still have my kind cluster running over here. I haven't done any magic, and all those packages that Grant installed via the UI are here on my local kind cluster. So definitely really cool. The last thing I kind of wanted to cover here before we close this out today is the up control plane token commands. So these are not super important for this workflow we've just gone through. However, it previously was kind of difficult to manage your control plane tokens. So once again, I said when we attached a self-hosted control plane, that was giving us a token back, and that was created in our cluster. So in the case that, that token was compromised, in the case that you somehow deleted that secret, previously the workflow was you deleted the self-hosted control plane on Upbound Cloud, which is not a big deal, right? It's just an entry with a connection to your cluster, and you create a new one. That being said, that's kind of cumbersome. If for some reason you needed multiple tokens or wanted to switch them out, there wasn't a good way to do that. So essentially, what we added was a few commands to help out with that. So once again, that's these token create, delete, and list commands. So what you'd want to do first is list your control planes, and I want all of mine in the Dan org. So we're going to see here this Dan Grant control plane. It is our self-hosted one, and we see this is its identifier. And so from there, I can say up cloud control plane token list, and I want to get all the tokens for this control plane, right? And I'll see that we have our elated Hamilton token here. That's the one that was created when we did up cloud control plane attach. And the contents of that are actually in the secret in our cluster. If I wanted to go ahead and switch that out, or better yet, I'll go ahead and delete that token. So I'm going to use the identifier of the token in this case. And that's deleted. And if we list again, we'll see that we don't have any. It's going to take it a moment for the agent refreshes and is unable to connect. But if we wanted to, we could look at that pod, and it's our Upbound agent one. And I'm going to go ahead and delete that pod. And once again, the secret that is currently present in the cluster is invalid, right? We deleted that token from Upbound Cloud. And so I'm going to delete the agent pod, which is essentially just going to make it spin right back up, right? Because it's managed by a deployment. And it does take this a moment for the pod to get deleted. And when it comes back up, we see it's in crash loop back off. The reason is it's now referencing the secret in the Upbound system namespace that is containing an invalid token. So if we want to rectify this situation, we can go in and say up cloud control plane token create. And actually, I'm going to do control plane list a Dan, because I need to get that that ID again. And I'm going to do token create. And I'm going to say I want to create a control plane token for this control plane. And you can also do things like, and I'll show here, you can specify your account. You can specify the name of the token if you want. By default, we actually consume Docker's name generator, which is why you saw something like elated Hamilton there. But I'll just go ahead and create it normally. And there's my control plane token. So you probably don't want to do this, right? Because now the whole internet has my control plane token. So what I'm going to do is go back in, and I'm going to list my control plane token. So that's the amazing Hawking one that was just created there. And I am going to make sure that none of y'all are able to.
It's a race
to my cluster.
There we go.
All right, so that's now gone. So we're able to get rid of it. But if we did want to actually create one and replace our token there, I'll do a create, and I'm going to take that token and I'll do up UXP connect again. Essentially, this is going to replace the contents of our secret here. And if we get our agent, and I'm going to go ahead and speed this up by deleting the pod again. And we'll see it come back after we delete it. And once it comes back, it's going to see that token there. It's going to use that to connect Upbound Cloud, and it's going to authenticate again. So we'll see that here in just a moment. Looks like it's running successfully. If I hop back over to Upbound Cloud, look at my control planes, it looks like it's ready, and everything is present here, and you're good to go. So that's just some useful commands to manage those tokens in case you do happen to expose them on a live stream and need to redact them. Although at that point, right, your cluster is pretty much compromised because someone could have that. So from there, I can just go ahead and I'll do control plane list, and I'm going to do need to do in the Dan org. I'm going to go ahead and clean up this control plane. And we should see that it is no longer present on Upbound Cloud. Yep, just went away there. And we can go ahead and clean up my cluster. And we're good to go. I think that's a pretty good show. What do you think, Grant?
I think it's a great show. Yeah, I think this is a good time to wrap it all up. Thanks everyone for watching and everything like that. Like Dan said again, and we'll put all the links in the notes for the video when the recording is up. You can find all the tools mentioned here, UXP, CLI, on the Upbound GitHub organization. They're open source. We would love to get your thoughts, and feel free to open bugs and issues and things like that. There's also an Upbound channel on the Crossplane Slack, which you can find at slack.crossplane.io. And searching for the Upbound channel will take you there, and you can talk to Dan and I about some of the stuff you showed here. Also, to get started with Upbound Cloud, it's totally free for individuals. Just create an Upbound account. Takes like 2 seconds. And if you want to use some of the more advanced features like users, teams, private repositories, all you have to do is create an organization during sign up, and that'll start a free Upbound Enterprise trial. I think that lasts for about 14 days or so. And then you have 7 days after that to reach out to us and let us know that you want to extend it or make it permanent. So with that, I think that's a good summary, good place to wrap up and everything. Thanks again for joining us. I think we'll probably do another one of these live streams in the next few weeks when we have some more product updates and announcements to make. But until then, I think you can find us on Twitter at Grant Gamina and at Hashdan.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah. Again, we'll put those in the notes. So thanks, everyone.